Hello, welcome. Um, in this video, I'm going to do a response to a Seventh-day Adventist um, that responded to my video, uh, part 1, on justification and imputation. In that video, I got into the definition of justification, to justify, justified, righteousness, those word groups, which translate from dikaio, dikaiosune, etc. And I got into the fact of imputation, that it's an external act. And so this Adventist, her name's Lizzie, I won't give her last name, made a response pretty briefly. She said Romans 6 is the true revelation of what it is to be justified by God. And she showed a couple charts. One chart showing justification, arrow pointing down, divine internal justification. Chart number 2 is God's imputation of righteousness into the man. So we have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to talk about here. And me being a former Seventh-day Adventist, studied my way out 12 years ago, praise God, and was released from the false gospel of Adventism, which is very similar to Rome, who they abhor. So I was liberated by the biblical gospel, the gospel of grace, the gospel that's a free gift. And so I'm going to just kind of go off the cuff and respond to Lizzie's assertions here. And we're going to cover some other areas when it comes to Adventism and when it relates to justification and salvation in general. First, we'll get into the biblical text. Then we're going to get into Seventh-day Adventists believe 27 fundamental doctrines. Now they have 28 doctrines, and they updated it. The millennium's a new doctrine. And they only have one doctrine out of the 27 on salvation, which is normal with Adventism. They put out Bible prophecy videos on Adventist teaching, 27 doctrines, or 28 now since I left the church. And usually they might give one lesson on the gospel, and they even mess that up. But where do we start? And also I have here to demonstrate that in fact, and we're going to get into this, that the Adventist Church claims to be the remnant, the true heirs of the Protestant Reformation. I'm going to refute that. It's easy to refute. We're going to get into that as well. We're going to get into the Council of Trent, which I have on my computer, the Catechism to the Council of Trent. But this is the 6th session of the Council of Trent. And then what we have here is some works by Catholics on the doctrine of justification. Not that I believe it, but I believe in studying other views as well. This is the Lectures of Justification, John Henry Newman. Robertson Genesis, massive work, Not by Faith Alone, and of course the Catechism. So the Adventists have a lot in common, we're going to see, and I'm not going to get into them, but we'll get into the Council of Trent. And so they have quite a lot in common with Rome when it comes to the gospel. And yet they're supposedly the heirs of the Protestant Reformation. We're the heirs of the Protestant Reformation, and yet we don't believe anything that they taught at all. It's amazing. This is what I thought as an Adventist. Then as soon as I got into Adventism, I started studying the Protestant Reformation. Started getting books from the Lutheran Reformed perspective, reading Luther, reading Calvin, reading the Reformers, and I was pretty shocked to learn when it comes to salvation, soteriology, regeneration, being born again, conversion, um, man's deadness in sin and depravity, justification, sanctification, a union with Christ, all of this, the Adventists don't agree with the Reformation. They're not heirs of the Reformation. I'll just get to this point, get it out of the way, then we'll get into our text. The Adventists are not heirs of the Protestant Reformation. The heirs of the Protestant Reformation, and here's the thing, I did a video on this recently. We're all non-Roman Catholics Protestant, and the answer is no, an unequivocal no. There's two streams from the Magisterial Reformation: Lutheran and Calvinist. Lutheran, Reformed. Those churches today that are confessional, conservative, are the heirs of the Protestant Reformation. No one else. People want to call Baptists, certain like Free Will Baptists, Independent Baptists, Protestant. They're not Protestant. Most of evangelicalism is not Protestant. All Protestantism is evangelical, because the Lutherans were, the first time the word evangelical was used was to Lutherans. All Lutherans and Reformed are evangelical, but not all evangelical are Protestant, you see. That's the difference. What has hindered the church, including the Adventist church, is Wesleyanism, which is a far cry from the Protestant Reformation and moving closer back to Rome. So, yeah, the Adventists are not heirs of the Protestant Reformation, no matter what they say. They are not heirs of the Protestant Reformation. And I'm going to get some quotes here. Studying Together by Mark Finley. This is pretty much how to indoctrinate people into the Adventist church. He gives tips on dealing with Lutherans, dealing with Catholics, dealing with Methodists, to indoctrinate them, get them into the Adventist cult, which is what it is. And he says, just a little piece here, point number 6 on Lutheranism: the essential issue for each Lutheran is whether they will follow additional light going beyond Luther or lose what they once had. Light is progressive. So they do claim the heirs of the Protestant Reformation. I'm going to go on, then we're going to get into Romans chapter 6 and imputation. Okay, I'm quoting from page 160, the stagnated Reformation. The Reformation of the Christian church should not have ended in the 16th century. The Reformers had accomplished much, but had not rediscovered all the light lost during the apostasy. And they go on. And of course, all of the light would be Saturday is the gospel. You know, the Sabbath is the gospel of Adventism. And the immortality of the soul, they didn't deny that. You know, that's another light so those are the two main ones, they would say. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, let's get into our text. Just have books and everything everywhere here. Oh yeah, okay. Romans 6:1. Let's go there. What shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin so grace may increase? May it never be. How shall we who have died to sin live in it? Now, why is Paul in verse 1 of chapter 6 anticipating an objection? Why is he doing that? Well, it's simply because up until this point in Romans chapter 118 through 321 deals with the depravity of man, how the Jew and the Gentile is guilty before God for breaking his law and are under his wrath. Then 321 to 521 deals with justification and imputation. Then chapter 6 deals with sanctification. That's why he says, what shall we say then? Or shall we continue in sin? Because up until this point, he didn't deal with practical sanctification. And so the point by Lizzie, that Romans 6 is the true revelation of what it is to be justified by God, shows ignorance of the book of Romans. Shows great ignorance of the book of Romans. I hate repeating myself, but the first video, I don't think Lizzie even